Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Let's Process That podcast with Emily and Nick. I'm Emily Christopher. This is Nick Honorkamp.
Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Nick.
Hello.
We are so glad that you guys have joined us yet again. We are now on episode 3. I feel like the more we're doing this, the more comfortable we're getting. And before we dive in, to today's topic or just even our conversation, I just want to remind everybody that this podcast is all about us processing through things. So we're not going to get everything correct. We are growing, we are learning, we are moving. And so we just allow space to do that. This is a safe place. This is a place where we can truly process through things that are difficult, things that maybe a gray area, things that may be just one big old question mark, and that's okay. So we welcome you guys to also process along as we do as well. I hope that this allows some people to kind of broaden their minds and their spirits, their hearts, etc. Nick, before we move on, anything you want to say in regard to that?
Yeah, I'm hoping when you said that, I thought, I've been watching a couple people that are in my world starting podcasts, and they're trying to define exactly what they're going to talk about in their niche, their expertise. And I'm like, Emily and I don't know anything. The more we mature, the more we do not know, but we like awkward conversations. And so at the end of the day, I would much rather have a conversation, particularly with somebody I disagree. I am so tired of having conversations where somebody nods their head yes the whole time I'm talking. And sometimes you and I disagree. And so I'm like, let's have some awkward conversations. Let's meet some people who think differently than us. And maybe we can expand our horizon a little bit. So I'm all for today's conversation.
Awesome. So before we dive into today's conversation, because it's kind of a broad topic, and I just want to let everybody know we don't know where a conversation will lead us every week. What Nick and I do is we throw out a topic to one another, and then we sometimes will have a lot to say about it. Sometimes it'll be something we're painfully familiar with, and then sometimes it will be something we may not have ever experienced or gone through, but we want to go there. We want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
So if you missed the last episode, that was necessary endings. And I'm going to be honest, I was surprised that we went there so fast, but I think it's, like you said, the nature of who we are. We're both very outspoken. We're not afraid to have confrontation or conversation. We're probably two of the most confrontational people that I know.
So can I respond to it real quick? Because
absolutely.
I was talking to somebody this week, and they're telling me how sweet and nice I was. And I was like, listen, I'm Mr. Confrontational. My boss used to hate confrontation, and they would say about him, and so he would send me to do the confrontation, and they would say about him, Frank walks softly, but he carries a big Nick. And so they're like fascinated that I love I don't love confrontation, but I'm very comfortable in confrontation. Mm-hmm. And so first of all, I just absolutely love that. Second of all, I'm not afraid of wherever we're going to go and what we might discover in that moment. If it happens, something bad comes out and we have to talk about it, and the next episode we have to come back, apologize, and clean it up, we don't care. You and I, for whatever reason, have this strong love of resurrection, and the only way you can have resurrection is death. And so we're like, that's got to die, so now we can resurrect.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting, even at my new job, I've only been there 2 months, and like already I feel like I've just been like, okay, here's A, B, and C. Here's some things I see, like take it or leave it. Like I know I'm the new girl, but the more that I speak out about, and I question everything. I've always been that way.
Sure.
And it's interesting. I feel like in a society where a lot of times we're trying to breeze over things or brush things under the rug, especially in the church world.
Yep.
People really appreciate when you're honest.
Yep.
And even my boss now, we had a pretty intense conversation with our team this week, and she texted me and she was like, "Thank you so much. I gave you full permission to show me any blind spots. Like, I want to grow, I want to learn." And I was telling my parents about this, and I was like, most people don't tell you that in the first 2 months of meeting. And
It's
I was
true.
like, it's because I just put everything out on the table. And I was like, hey, here's this, here's who I am. And then they give me permission to be myself and to use that. Because I think it's a gift to be able to confront things in love because you genuinely want to see things better.
Yeah, and that's the thing is most people function from a place of vulnerability, weakness, insecurity that they can't speak out and say that. So when they meet someone strong like you who can come and bring the energy, passion, and say, hey, I'm only saying this so that we all can get better. That is an impressive gift, and people recognize that. Even my boss does that. And he's like, I want to hear what you have to say. I want you to tell me what you see. I was in a restaurant yesterday, and I'm picking out things that I would change about the restaurant. And I've never run a restaurant. I was in a church building today, and they have a tree stump above the front door. I couldn't figure out why that tree stump's there. And I grabbed one of their staff and said, why is that there? They said, can you see that? I said, yeah, I'm a tall guy. I can see that. And they're like, I think it's a Christmas play 3 years ago or something. And I'm like, yeah. So you and I are constantly like picking up on stuff. And we're like, I could help you if you let me. And I'll just tell you what I see. I'm not always right, but I see what I see. That's a tree stump in a church building. Why?
And I'm going to ask the question. Yeah. Well, so I had a coworker come into our area where my office and my team is, and they're like, I need an opinion. And my other coworker said, Emily has several. If you ask for it, I will give it. Don't worry.
I remember when I was in a service one time and somebody said, the Lord is saying that you don't always have to have an opinion. And I'm like, what? I'm an American. I have to have an opinion about everything. And so since then, I've tried to, hold my tongue a little bit and not say what I see.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a time and place, but, again, if you're in an environment that's encouraging that, so be it. They've asked for it.
And I love your heart, though. I love your heart. You are outspoken. You're opinionated. You're not afraid of being wrong. Hard conversations, awkward conversations, but your heart's in the right place. You're really wanting to help the people that you're working with, and you're really proud of where you work, and you want to be the best that you can be, and you want them to be the best they can be. So I think that gives you your security in yourself and your heart being in the right place really takes you a long way.
Well, let me say this, Nick. I've had it modeled for me. Like, you can say all these compliments, but what some of you may not know is Nick was my boss for 8 years. And when people give me compliments about leadership or the way I run a team or work with the team, management, anything like that, I'm like, there's two people to thank. Nick Honorkamp and my father, Greg Christopher, because you guys, everything I've learned, I've gotten from you guys. So when you give me a compliment, you're really giving yourself a compliment. So
but Emily, could I really have been myself without you? Could I really have been the leader I was without you rolling your eyes at me or something in the meeting? Oh, you roll your eyes all the time.
I know. Listen, first of all, you don't have to worry about me saying, like, I will say something, but my face will always say it first.
Absolutely. You cannot hide your emotions. You give your face trumpets what your heart is thinking. And so sometimes I say, okay, maybe my best leadership came out with the people that best reflected to me when I was crazy, when I was out of line, when I was being toxic, whatever. But I think that I really do think we worked well together. And that's why we're doing this podcast. We don't work together anymore. Neither one of us are in the church world. And yet at the same time, both of us, well, we're not pastors. I'm still in the church world, but both of us, have an honesty with each other and an appreciation with each other that helps us, communicate our true hearts. And so thank you for saying that, but you really are brilliant.
Well, thank you. And so are you. So, like I was saying before we took a little rabbit trail there, last episode was Necessary Endings. And we both shared some pretty intense stuff. So if you missed that episode, please go check it out. And we touched on necessary endings, why they're important. We talked about each of our experiences with necessary endings. And then it kind of led into a place that I feel like we need to kind of dive into now. And that is, all right, after the ending has happened, what now? What are some things that we do when the ending has happened and we're on the other side? We're in a new season. What are some things to be intentional? What are some lessons to really pack away and take with us when the new season has begun, but there's been a very big necessary ending? And as I just sat down, like I said, some of our podcast stuff, when it comes to topics, like we will research, but nothing is scripted. It's mostly like, here's a thought. And then we'll run with it.
See, that's what people don't know is that, like in our last one, we had both read the book Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. We had done some research. We both had quotes. In this week, you send me two sentences and say, hey, by the way, this is what I want to talk about. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. So Emily leads this podcast. She's the leader. And so I'm like, all right, we're going to process this out loud. It's going to be fascinating because neither one of us know what the other's going to say. And we have such a strong relationship, we don't care. And that makes it part of the fun is we're not here to sell an end conclusion. We're here to invite people into the process of discovering how they feel. And that's why we don't mind honest disagreement as long as it's not venomous.
Absolutely. That's how we get better. Got to challenge each other.
All right. So, lead away.
I'm going to actually toss it to you because like I said, right before this, I was jotting down so many things about because again, if you missed the first two episodes, I've moved cities. I live 7 hours away. I'm in a significantly larger city, whole new career, basically a whole new life in the last 7-8 months. And so I've definitely had a necessary ending and a huge transition. And then Nick is also he's a little bit out ahead of me, about 1.5 years. And so yeah, I just want to talk about, because again, we talk about the necessary ending, but it's like, what's life after the necessary ending? And we're both fresh still.
Yep. So I'll talk about a couple things. First of all is, I was a career pastor 23 years. I still work with churches. I'm not a pastor anymore. And I work with different kind of churches that I agree with their statement of faith. I have to be very inclusive, and I hate using that word, because both the right and the left immediately assume that they know what I'm saying, and they don't. That's not me. I represent any church and that calls on the name of Jesus, no matter how progressive or conservative, that want to help our neighbors in crisis, putting food in the mouths of homeless people. But as you talk about necessary endings, the first thing I thought about was environment. Is that. And whether you believe in the biblical story of creation, God created the environments for life to exist. And environments always exist before new life comes forward. And I think this is a huge issue with a lot of people. You take someone who leaves a relationship and immediately jumps into another relationship. That relationship is almost always doomed to replicate the exact same results of the former relationship because there was no new environment for something new to happen. And so I think about, I'm writing a book right now, and I'm going to make it into an e-course and a mentoring program. And the other day I was talking to a guy who's done this a lot, and he said, you need to build an ecosystem for your book to live in. And most people don't build an ecosystem for their life, for new relationships to come forward, new careers to come forward, dreams to happen. And that ecosystem of environment is so important because it feeds us. Whether you are Big Bang Theory or creationist, it doesn't matter. We all know that certain elements have to exist for life to exist on this planet. And so people don't give themselves permission to build the ecosystem they need for something new to emerge. They just cut off the old, and if they're not careful, they take the old right back into their new season because they don't create the ecosystem. One quick story, crazy. in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we were really busy, Emily. We were like, every day the rules changed. Every day we had to do 3 to 5 options of what we were going to do, how we're going to do it. We were busy. We didn't learn a new language. We didn't take time off. We didn't get that dream vacation that we all wanted, sabbatical, whatever. You and I worked hard. But I did decide to plant a garden that year, and I never did a garden before. So I borrowed a rototiller. I tilled up my front yard. I got one of these country women, it's one of my best buddies, come over and plant some seeds and tell me when to plant, how to fertilize. I did all of that. And do you know how much grew in my garden? Not one thing. Because I put the garden under a canopy of trees in the forest where there's no sunlight.
That'll do it.
So I did all this work and got the same results I had the year before when I didn't plant a garden, because I didn't create an ecosystem or environment for it to live. And I really think that's important. And I would just simply ask somebody who's in a new season of their life and say, what have you changed about your life that's going to give you a chance for something to evolve and be more fruitful than what you've had in the past?
Absolutely. And I echo that. I know last week you asked, like, what's different after your necessary ending? And I said, everything. Everything is different. Like, there is very little that looks, sounds, smells, feels like 5 years ago.
Okay, and how does that feel to you right now?
Fantastic.
It does. It's freeing, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, so much. And, without changing everything, like you said, I'm going to get the same results. And that's, what do we call that? Insanity. Trying, doing the same thing over and over and over again, trying to get different results or expecting different results.
Yep.
And so, in some cases, you can prune away and shed a few things, but then there's other times where everything must go.
Yep, completely. One more thing. I remember a young lady that grew up in your youth department who's a worship leader. She's a songwriter. She's a singer. She's a worship leader. And I remember talking to her a year or two ago. She had went on a mission trip, international mission trip. She came back and said, I know what I want to do with my life. And I said, this is easy. I've watched you since you were a young girl become a singer, musician, performer. And she says, I want to go to seminary and I want to become a preacher. And I was like, wait a minute. Where did you figure that out? She says, when I was on that international mission trip, I got away from my family and friends, went to some place new that had not defined me, and I became something new, and I found out who I was away from that. So you think about how many things in our life have predisposed us towards something that somebody believed about us and did not give us the grace to become what we wanted to become.
Oh, this is a whole book. This is a whole book. So I'm a huge advocate that every 18 to 21-year-old needs to leave home for some amount of time. I don't care if that's even like a 3-month thing or 30-year thing. Like I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, like me going to college in Tennessee and being the only person, I didn't know anybody when I went off to college at 18, and getting away from everything I knew really broadened my horizons. And so I think a lot of times we do have to, like you said, in that ecosystem, in that environment, we have to find, that's when you really find out who you are. When everything else, nobody knows your mama and daddy, nobody knows what you did. No one knows that you were the captain of the football team, all this stuff. That you start making decisions and you're finally like, oh, this is interesting. I actually hate that. I hate the color orange, but I've been told my whole life I need to love orange. And it's just like crazy.
I totally agree with you. So tell me a couple of things about your now that you've embraced. I mean, you've had a little bit of time to figure out the new. You did a great job with your necessary ending. You left at the exact right time. You were supposed to leave our community, the church, stuff like that. You did a great job. And now you're in this new season where you don't have the fences and the boundaries up, and everything is questioned. Everything is new. Everything is voted on from this perspective as a young woman. What are a couple of the clues that people could tap into, or at least start to try to replicate, that would give them a chance of letting a dream come forward, or let the real them? Because when you grow up and you stay in your hometown, when you grow up and you stay with your parents, around your parents, the people that help define you are the people that knew you when you were 2, when you were 5. And so here you are as, a young woman, and they still see that. And that's one of the reasons I love the church and jail, is jail and church will give you a chance to start over. Like, you've burned every bridge you have in jail. I mean, your mama can't support you, your daddy can't support you. And same thing with church, is you come to the church and you're like, you don't understand all that I've done. I said, I'm here for the newness in you to evolve. So I'm curious about what you've learned. I've learned a couple things, but I'm curious what you've learned about that people could actually hang on to and say, that's part of my ecosystem. I need to keep that there. Anything come to mind?
Oh gosh, several things. So I'm going to try to get everything out, because as you're talking, a lot of things are popping in my head.
I'll be quiet.
No, you're good. No, it's good. So 3 things, like actual intentional things that I know you could take and, I don't know, actually apply them, implement them. One thing about moving away is I stopped explaining myself.
Wow.
Every time I would have, and I've always had, we've talked about this before, very intense opinions or ideas. And before, when I would present those, I feel like I had to explain the hell out of it. Like, it was just like every talking point, like I had to just make sure everything was accounted for in I had to have this concrete opinion, because if I even wavered a little bit, someone was going to shoot me down and call me a hypocrite. So, moving away from all that, I just learned that I don't have to explain myself. Awesome. And it's been interesting. I don't argue with people at all anymore. Someone I love very dearly brought up something to me the other day, and I was like, okay. And before I would have been out of shape, I would have given them like my 5 points of like dissertation of why and defended it and all this stuff. And we disagreed, and I let it go. And I was like, okay, that's fine.
That's so awesome.
The second thing was I dated myself.
Really?
And oh my gosh. And I still do. So I'm in a great relationship. He takes me out on fun dates. We had one this weekend. We went to a concert. It was lovely. But about once a week, I will take myself to lunch, like where I want to go. I'll go buy myself flowers from Trader Joe's. I will just do these things that I love to do. And I'm in a place where nobody knows who I am. So I'm never running into anybody. Like, it is time for me. And I know there's a whole self-care, self-love thing. But I'm really intentional about it, because I only do things that, bring me so much joy. And I ask myself, what are things that you really love, Emily? What would you love to do today? And I'm like, dang, I would love some Thai food, and I really want a pretty bouquet of flowers. So I go and I do that. And I will sometimes take a book. Sometimes I won't. I sat in a cafe about 2 weeks ago, and I just watched everybody. I just sat there with my coffee, and I looked around, and the weather was nice, and it was wonderful. So that's a very intentional thing, is I date myself, and I ask myself why I like the things, and I'll even kind of reflect. I'm like, I've really been interested in this band recently. I wonder why do I feel so connected to that music right now? Or why do I love that TV show right now? And I almost am analyzing myself to find out why I like what I like.
I love it.
Without any external, yes, we all have external influences, but without people telling me what I should like or what I should read or what I should enjoy. And then the third thing is following the peace. I follow the peace, period. Period. The Holy Spirit is peace to me. So.
Oh, but the world gets mad at you. Oh, excuse
They
me.
do.
The Christian world gets mad at you if you don't call peace by a spiritual name, right?
Of course. Or if I say that my gut, who I believe the Holy Spirit dwells within me, and when I think of
They
Holy
can't
Spirit,
handle
that's
it.
gut and intuition.
I
That's
know.
it.
It just drives me crazy, that religious spirit that says you have to name it something spiritual. No,
Yeah.
we're trying to appeal to the masses and tell them what that is without freaking them out with spiritual terms.
Or dare I say we stop separating at all?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. Crazy.
No, I have some scriptural stuff I can say about that, but I don't want this to be a scriptural thing. So
Right.
go ahead.
But yeah, so when I'm making decisions, when I'm in conversation, I let peace guide everything I do because, like I was sharing last week, almost 5 years of my life was in turmoil, stress, and fear. And that was not of God, and that was not of anything that I want to be a part of ever again. So when I am doing everyday life, I follow the peace. And that honestly dictates everything that I do.
I love that.
So those are 3 things that just popped into my head that I'm super intentional about with the season of life I'm in right now.
All right, I'm going to give you 3, and I did not plan this. 2 of my 3.
I didn't plan that. That was pretty good.
I was going to say, I was really impressed you had that much content. But 2 of the 3 that you said are similar to mine. And then I have a third one. One is I don't follow peace, but I follow joy. In this season of my life, I want to be led by joy. I spent my whole life led by responsibility, obligation, duty. I mean, I can't even explain where that began. But there's something in me that says, take care of everybody, make sure everybody comes back alive, make sure everybody got fed, whatever. Duty, responsibility, obligation to our community, to our church, to everybody, which always left me at the end of the line. And then the other thing about dating yourself I find so fascinating is I've been doing that and I didn't even know it. So I'm going to confess right here. All right. Okay. My job is to date pastors. So I usually take pastors to breakfast, to coffee, to lunch, and talk to them about the ministry and what we're doing and give them opportunities to serve in our community.
And back up just so people know a little bit, because it's so funny. When you're not in the church world, even though you're saying like, I date pastors, like give a little bit more context. He's there to build like care and relationship. He's not actually in a romantic date.
Thank you for saying that. I am so in the church world that I'm not used to those kind of concepts until it hits me, and I'm so caught off guard when somebody hits on me, another guy or whatever. But so after 23 years of pastoring, I work for a Christian nonprofit that has homeless shelters, jail ministry, free medical clinics. My job is to work with the local churches, progressive and conservative, to give them opportunities to serve our neighbors in crisis. And so it's normal to call a pastor up, so can I take you to coffee, talk a little bit about what your church is doing, what our ministry is doing, how we can partner together. And I love that piece of my job. But I find myself about once a week needing to go to a cool little cafe that's a little quirky, a little weird. I have different ones all over the city, where I just sit and drink coffee and I read a book or I study or I work and I watch people. And then every once in a while at lunch, I'll have a beer. And I don't table dance. I don't do anything crazy or anything like that. I just order a beer and I sit and I watch people and I wonder what their backstory is. And I look for opportunities to have random conversations with strangers to get to know them as humans. I don't care if they watch Fox News or CNN. I don't care how they vote. I don't care what their religious views are. I just want to value them as a human being. So I do follow joy. I do date myself and didn't know I was doing that. Gosh, how naive am I? I was hitting on myself and didn't even know it. But the third thing is that in this season of newness, I'm really tapping into things that originate with me, things that are authentic, right? Yeah, authentic.
Authentic.
Thank you. I met a woman today whose accent was on a different syllable of her name, and it got me all confused, and I've been struggling all day. But what are the things that are me and not the world? And there's so many times I respond in a script in something I've been taught. And in this season, I find myself journaling, writing, saying things to myself that are just, I don't care what anybody else thinks. It's time to start being me. I'm way too late in life to start being me. And I think that anybody that's going down the new path, I love the 3 things you laid out to give them some principles that will guide them. But I also want them to be themselves. And sometimes journaling and writing a thought out makes you commit to it. If you write it out and it doesn't feel right, you'll cross it out. You'll change a word. You'll do something. But if you leave it, you've just defined something about yourself that you've never defined before. And I think journaling and writing are 2 of the most important things you can do to really figure out who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anything creative will start to open that up.
Yeah.
You know, people who pick up a paintbrush for the first time in their life and they're like, oh, I just had the most brilliant thought while I was doing that. But yeah, trying new things, expressing ourselves will unlock those places.
Hey, so what's something new you want to do creatively?
Super new?
Yeah, something super new that'd be like, I'd like to try that one time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. For those of you who don't know, Nick's wife is an incredible artist. Like,
that's
amazing.
correct.
TinaHonnerCampArt.com, I think. If I'm misusing it, just Google.
You got
it.
Good.
Okay, good. It's funny. Right before you left our previous job, she and I were having a conversation. It was the day that we all went and drank at that place in Hendersonville.
I never took my staff to drink at a brewery ever. Let's just get that on the record. What are you talking about?
No, never. But hey, you were quit. You quit so you could do it. No, I'm just kidding.
You're talking about Sierra Nevada.
No. This was it was a cool place. It had like a train cart.
Oh, you're talking about Whistle Hop in Fletcher.
Whistle Hop. Shout out Whistle Hop. What a cool spot. So
I know, and that Tommy was so cool that he saw where we were at on social media, but he didn't call it out. And he says, "You guys are a mile from my house, but I'm not telling anybody where you're at." Remember that?
That's so funny. Yeah. Remember when we used to live our lives in fear?
Well, you remember we used to have to hide everything?
Yeah. Can't relate now. But anyways, there I was talking to Tina and I was like, I think I want to start painting. And
really?
She was so sweet. She was like, you should come hang out with me in the studio. And I never took her up on it before I moved.
You should have. Yeah.
I know. And so a few of my friends here are artists. I have a friend, Karina, who's a muralist and is like insanely talented. And she does like different painting and art classes. And I think that's going to be my next thing. We have this giant... so in our living room, it's 2 stories and then there's just like this huge open space. And I want to paint like a giant canvas of like abstract, crazy art. So maybe that's my next creative thing, but it would be very out of the box because I've never done a lot of painting, drawing kind of.
But you and I have painted together before.
Least we forget. Yes, we did take a painting class together.
That was a long time ago, and a lot's changed since then. But we have taken a painting class together.
Even when you look at the photo, a lot of people and things have changed.
You just look at it and you're like, life. And so it's almost like a bowling ball. The picture is a bowling ball where life just went
blew it up.
So what I'd like to do is Jonesboro, Tennessee has a storytellers conference. And they do like 3 or 4 days about how to tell stories. I love telling stories. You know, I've been a public speaker for a long time, but I've never studied storytelling. I'd love to like go to a professional like storytelling thing and tell a story and like be validated in the storytelling world in some way, you know, like that guy can tell a story or whatever. And so that's something creative that I've been thinking about that I'd like to tap into just a little.
I think that would be awesome.
Yep.
And I think it's our Appalachian heritage too. We just
Absolutely.
love
Sure.
storytelling.
Yeah.
Like I have vivid memories of my grandparents telling stories. My step grandfather was just a hoot of a man, and he
Hmm.
loved telling some. I mean, they were all outlandish, and he probably lied about most of it, but like could entertain. Um,
Absolutely.
and one of my things on my bucket list is to do stand up comedy.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes, like I have a few so I feel like I'm always funnier like in the moment. I play off of like people and like
Hmm.
situational stuff really well. But there's a few stories I tell that I'm like this is pretty dang funny. I could do this. I could get up. And that's what really stand-up comedy is, right? It's just like good storytelling.
It really is. And being able to interact with the crowd, just really being
Mhm.
comfortable in your own skin, whether you're telling a weakness or strength or whatever. I think you could do a good job with it. I've seen you in boss mode a couple of times. And when I say a couple, I mean like 1,000. But
There we
I've
go.
seen, I've seen you in boss mode and you can so own a stage. The one thing about you and I that's fascinating is that we do better in bigger arenas. We do better when we're
Mhm.
trying to fill the air with energy and atmosphere. We don't do well in small groups where we have to close ourselves in.
Mhm.
And so that's, like, of course, you and I are just talking through, media, digital media, and people may not be able to see that, but you and I both love a big stage and we love to come alive. And we have no problem with that. There's no incongruency with our character with a big crowd and turning the volume up a little bit.
Right. And it's so funny. So, I have a coworker. He's absolutely brilliant, has a PhD, and he's very refined. He has very dry humor. And the other day he was talking to me and he was like, I have a nickname for you because every time I come into their part of the office, like I come barreling in and I'm shooting on all cylinders because there's a lot of funny people in that department. And so we just are
Yeah.
like bam, 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 bam. And we get
Yep.
louder and louder and louder.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to start calling you Tone It Down, Christopher. And I said, well, let me tell you one thing. It ain't never going to happen.
Never
and
happened.
I said, I have gotten everything in my life because of my personality and that I was not afraid to just be who I am. And so if you think for a second I'm going to tone it down, I'm not. And he was like,
Well,
you know what? That's fair.
and the interesting thing is you're an attractive woman, and what I think when I think of you has nothing to do with you physically, has nothing to do with it's just strictly your personality. You're like this elephant that stomps and it vibrates for thousands of miles, and everybody's like, Emily's in town. We need to go see what's going on, right? And it's just your uniqueness is this fullness, this bigness, this range, this sound that you emanate that just catches people's attention. I'm not shocked that he hears you before he sees
me.
you. Mm-hmm. Not
For
shocked.
sure. And I love my personality, but I also just really admire people too who are so steady and calm and like
Yeah,
that and
sure.
grounding. Um, Two people pop into my head. One is my graphic designer at work. Her name's Kirsten, and she is the most like steady individual. And she's just, I mean, when I think of her, I just think of like a steady river that just is
Okay.
flowing, and it is
I
so
know
impressive.
I know the other person.
Do
You
you? Okay,
better you better say his name. Your cousin.
well, oh, for sure, for sure.
Oh my gosh, Logan is like the
Logan.
epitome. Logan Green, the house is on fire, and you have no clue because Logan's like steady, got it under control, no problems.
I have a glass of water, and I'm just gonna turn it, and it'll put the whole fire out. Logan's like that. Oh
Who are you
gosh.
gonna say?
Well, Adrian, my boyfriend, is also just like
you're dating your cousin.
Oh God, North Carolina. No, well, you know what? It's funny. They're both Enneagram 5s.
I'm not shocked.
So, and your wife is a 5. So what does that say about us? We need steady eddies in our life. That's what we need.
So that we can be wild and paint outside the lines and get a little wild and crazy. Yeah. So what's fascinating, I love me some Logan because you guys would send Logan to reel me in. And Logan would come in and say, hey, pastor, we need to do something different. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm the pastor. And Logan would be like, oh, he just so soft and gentle, just reel me in. And after a while, I realized every time Logan came, he was representing like a dozen other people. And
Yeah.
we need those people in our lives. But you know what? They need us. They need 3D, 4D. They need color. They need amplification. They need us.
Yeah. Well, and that's the conversation I had with a coworker who
Yep.
called me Tone It Down. I said, could you imagine how chaotic it would be if everyone acted like me? Nothing would get done. It would be just mass hysteria. And it would also be very boring if everybody
Yep.
acted like you all the time.
Yep.
And so that is why, just as you were saying earlier, we have to be fully ourselves. The world needs us to be fully who we were created to be, because your personality type, your ideas, your experience, there's nobody else that can contribute like you can. And so we need you to be yourself. And so kind of circling back, tying all of this together, when you're in a new season, I think the biggest takeaway is be yourself. Find who you are, whether you're doing this at 18 or you're doing it at 88.
Yeah. My advice would be F you. Fertilize you. Fertilize you. That's what you got to do. You got to fertilize you in this season.
Put that on a shirt. Nick said F you.
But I meant fertilize you. I'm still in the church world. I like to say stuff.
I know. I'm so sorry. But yeah, that's really what it's about. Like making sure you're intentional with whatever that looks like. And I wrote all these things down, and I'm going to see if any of them echo before we wrap up. So it's almost like I wrote like a little sermon with my bullet points here.
No, you did not.
No, I definitely didn't. But I said reflect and appreciate your previous season and the lessons you learned there. Lean into your support network. Find out who is really for you. Give yourself permission to dream. Embrace that change is inevitable. Be open and honest with yourself and those around you. Old things end so new things can begin. You gotta let it go. Try something new and out of the box. You are responsible for your yes and your no. So I feel like we hit a lot of those, especially the trying something new and letting go of the old stuff. But those are just some of my, like I said, I wrote these literally, this is just what like flooded out of me when I said we should kind of do a continuation of the last episode. So did any of that spark anything else? Is there something that you think you would say to somebody stepping out of a season and going into the next one?
Yeah, one thing you said, and it was the second or third thing that you said about listening to new people. I don't remember what you said, but my thought went immediately to engage in some new friends that can tell you what they see. Yeah. So if you're in a new season, make some new friends. You don't have to agree with them politically. You'll agree with them about the way they see life philosophically. But as you would find a new friend, I got a new friend in my life right now. I've met with him twice, and every time we get together, he says, I feel goosebumps. He says, right now, the synergy between us is just off, those kind of things where I feel the synergy, the collaboration. He doesn't see the world like I do, but I'm curious as to the way he sees me because I've had other voices define me. And so I want to know what he sees and what he feels. And I think a lot of people surround themselves with friends that believe like them, but they can't give them new information. So I really think that as we're doing new beginnings, if we finish necessary endings, start new beginnings, that it's important that when we meet somebody, even if we don't agree with their style of life, their views of the world, if they like us, we like them, listen to what they think about us, and maybe that'll give us a new perspective.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And of course, I've made a ton of new friends and connections here, and it is fascinating what is pulled out of you or what you learn about yourself from someone else who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have any of that other context. They're just seeing you as you are today, right now in this new season or whatever path you're on right now. And that is a really cool perspective to
Refreshing.
have.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Nick, I appreciate this conversation. I feel like I've learned and I feel really good about just even what we processed through hearing from you. And I would love for people to, mention some stuff in the comments. What are you learning in this next season of life? What are some lessons you've learned? Even if you went through a huge transition years ago, because there's definitely some perspective 20 years out of something looking
Sure.
back. I would love to hear that. But please let us know what are some lessons and some things that you're experiencing in a new season of life, or like I said, even if it was a long time ago, looking back, what are some revelations that you have? Please be sure to like us, follow us, subscribe, all the things. We'll link everything down below in the description where you can follow us. And we will be back next week with another episode. And thank you all for your patience, your gentleness as we learn how to be podcasters. I saw Nick bouncing that camera around. So if you got a little roller coaster moment, we're learning, okay?
That was for my ADHD folks. They needed to have a little bit of activity.
We'll shake it up. Yeah,
it was the bouncing ball. This is new technology for the bouncing ball.
There you go. And we're going to just keep getting better. So
absolutely.
We're open to feedback. We absolutely are, because we're learning. And I have to shout out our producer. Adrian Wos is doing awesome. Yes, he's my boyfriend, but Nick and I sure as heck don't know what we're doing from the technical side of it. So Adrian, as you edit this podcast and you get all ready, thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. He helps us both.
Yes. All right, friends, we will see you next time. Like, subscribe, and follow. Good night.